The International Maritime Organization's Marine Environment Protection Committee was held from the 3rd to the 7th of July 2023. In this video, the NI's volunteer advisor to the IMO, Mr. Neil Dulling, and the Director of Projects, Mr. David Patraiko, highlighted some of the outcomes and how they would impact the industry from the Institute's perspective.
Hello and welcome. I'm David Patraiko from the Nautical Institute headquarters staff in London, and I'm being joined by one of our members, Neil Dulling, who is not only a long-standing member of the Nautical Institute and does lots of volunteer work for us, but as the environmental manager for MOL LNG, he's been representing the Nautical Institute and helping us with our delegation at the IMO. Recently, the Marine Environmental Protection Committee's 80th session, where there were some significant decisions made. So, Neil, welcome. Thank you very much for your time coming here, and obviously for all the time you've spent in representing us at the IMO. I just mentioned that there were some really significant outcomes from the greenhouse gas meeting and also MEPC. Could you summarize what some of those were, please?
Yeah, so over the last 2 years, the IMO has been working on its greenhouse gas reduction strategy revision. And it took 2 years worth of intensive negotiations, and we've eventually come to a really good outcome. We have agreed to peak greenhouse gas emissions as soon as possible, with the aim of reaching net zero greenhouse gas emissions by 2050. Along the way, they've set targets and indicative measures to show us how we're doing. That includes aiming for 5%, striving for 10% uptake in alternative fuels or energy sources by 2030. It includes reducing the transport emissions from transport work by 40% by 2030. And it includes reducing the overall emissions by 20%, striving for 30% by 2030, and by 70%, striving for 80% by 2040. So it's really quite ambitious for the industry as a whole to get to these targets.
That is ambitious, particularly compared to, I know that they started the recording in 2008.
Yes.
So these percentages are against that 2008. So the change that we've had since 2008, the change we're going to have in the next 20 years are going to be really, really significant on that. So I hear a lot of different solutions mentioned, a lot of different fuel types, different ship designs. You work for one of the biggest shipping companies in the world. What are some of the fuel types and design issues that you're looking at?
Well, some of the other measures that were agreed and set in place at the MEPC meeting were about the life cycle assessment, or the LCA. They're called the LCA guidelines now. Basically what that means is fuels and their emissions are going to be judged from well to wake, from where we start with the getting it out of the ground or production to the final point of burning it on board the ship, which that's a good thing. But we're not going to be allowed to offset those emissions outside of the maritime fuel supply chain. We can only do it ourselves, which again is a good thing. We can't be buying our way out by offsetting our emissions to some other sector. We're also now looking at what they're calling the midterm and long-term basket of measures. And these basically are a whole bunch of proposals, ideas about what we're going to do next. They haven't really decided what they're going to do. They've narrowed them down, and they've now started what they're calling the comprehensive impact assessment, which is where they decide what the impacts of all these measures are going to be and how they're going to fix those impacts. We're looking at two types of basic measures: technical and economic. Technical measures are going to be a fuel standard, what fuels we're allowed to use. And this is where we've heard a lot about alternative fuels, that every fuel is going to be assessed, as I said, on a well-to-wake, on the LCA guidelines, on a well-to-wake basis. And we were already talking about new and alternative fuels that don't have carbon in them at all, like ammonia, like methanol, like hydrogen potentially, and all of those are being looked at. We're looking at alternative measures. There's a whole new industry coming into maritime now about carbon capture and storage. And then we're looking at economic measures as well. We're looking at a taxation system or a trading system where we can buy carbon credits, which will generate a lot of revenues to help with this decarbonisation process, which will allow the IMO or whoever's administering the taxation schemes to invest into infrastructure and development of countries and ports to help us to accelerate the decarbonisation.
Okay, well, I get that, technical and economic, but particularly here at the Nautical Institute, as you're aware, we put a lot of focus on human element, and so there's going to be probably a significant amount of learning that we have to do to make sure that these solutions, they're not only fit for purpose for the environment, but also that they're safe to operate. How is that going to be?
This is one of the big things that we pushed for ourselves as the Institute at MEPC, and I'm very pleased that the decarbonisation process, part of the strategy, it must be safe and it must be human element focused, so that actually all of the things and learnings that we've done over the years will make sure that it happens and will help our seafarers to develop and learn what the new things they need to. All of these alternative fuels that we're talking about come with risks. They come with new risks that we haven't dealt with in fuels before. We have dealt with most of them as cargoes in the tanker sector for a long time. We know what those risks are. And now what we have to do is take the lessons that we've learned from sections of our industry already, such as the LNG industry, where we've been using it as fuel for a long time, and translate that into the rest of the industry and make sure that we do this in a safe manner and make sure that we've educated our seafarers about the risks and about how to handle these alternative fuels in a safe way.
Okay, well, that's very important. And I can see that, an organization like the Nautical Institute, it's going to be essential that we're involved in these discussions at all times so that it doesn't get overtaken by just technology and economics.
Absolutely. It's very important that in this process that the seafarer's voice is listened to and understood. Our seafarers are the best resource that we have in the industry. They are the ones who are doing this work on a day-to-day basis. They're the ones who have the bright ideas about solving these technical issues when they come up. And we must make sure that they're listened to and that those solutions are embedded into the systems, because that's the way they work on the ship. That's how we will solve accidents and prevent accidents from happening.
And I suppose that goes just as well for the shoreside workers who are going to have to handle these systems. They're both going to have a similar understanding. What about the shoreside infrastructure? I mean, with all these different fuel types, is there going to be a significant transformation in ports?
We are going to see different changes in ports and developments in ports. The EU is already working on a big project for electrifying its key ports and core ports for the container industry and the passenger ship industry. And once they've worked that out and made sure that they've got sustainable supplies of power so that they can supply the ships, that will develop onwards towards other sectors of the industry. But at the moment, they're focusing on container ships and passenger ships. In terms of other things, there's going to need to be some form of infrastructure to support these new fuels. What that will look like at this stage is it's all new. We don't know, but there will need to be, and the workers who are supplying that, handling that for us, will need to be educated properly.
Right. So education is the key, or is a key.
Yeah, absolutely. Key. It always has been.
And as the Nautical Institute is an educational charity, we do focus on that area. So, Neil, just thank you very much. I know we could probably go on for hours on this, if not days and weeks. I think probably we'll need to do a lot more to educate our members on how to move forward.
I think over the next few years, we're going to see a lot of new technologies coming into the industry that are first deployments on ships. Some of it we can learn from what they've already done on shore. Some of it we're going to have to learn for ourselves from the beginning. I think we all need to be ready for working with these new technologies and what we can achieve out of them.
Well, that's our task at the Nautical Institute, sort of then. Okay, so we will do that. We will use the tools that we have, books, publications, webinars. In fact, it'd probably be a good idea to start thinking about a webinar on this subject, bring in some other stakeholders, and so that we can keep our members educated and up to date so that they can make better decisions. So, Neil, thank you again for coming.
A pleasure.
And representing the Nautical Institute at the IMO.